My name's Lowell Kamin. I'm CEO and director of Lodestar Battery Metals, formerly Silverton Metals, and we have repositioned the company to Snow Lake, Manitoba from Mexico. We've bought a resource we've bought an exploration property in Snow Lake, Manitoba, which is a district with over 100 years of history in mining. And we're really excited about transitioning the company. We've got a very tight capital structure, and we've got a very strong cash position. And we think that Snow Lake will develop into a very strong lithium supply chain into the North American EV market.
Lowell, the new kid on the block. Welcome. Welcome to London, first of all. Thanks for coming over. Right, rebranded. That's always quite a painful process to go through, but you've done it. So you're out the other side. You're here telling the story. So this has been a silver story. It's kind of evolving into a battery metal story through the lithium up in Manitoba. So what did you set out to do day one?
Well, that's a very interesting question. So I remember when CNR went public and Paul Tellier took over, and he removed 17 vice presidents in the first senior vice presidents in the first kind of 90 days. So I just removed everybody from the company and put my own people in and kept the right people in order to build the business on a go-forward basis. And that was a very painful process, but I think it's going to be extremely worthwhile.
Right. So, but tell me in terms of the business plan, what is it? What have you started? What did you start with, and what are you going to create it into? Or change it into?
I think that's a great place to start. So we have two properties in Mexico, one in Durango, which we're focused on. And the resource there is approximately 10 million ounces. So if you think about the value of that property, you think about the fact that silver's trading at around $20. So that's, $20 million of value. You can discount that back, and everybody's going to have their own opinion about that, what that's worth. I think it's worth more than zero, and it's not in our share price. And we need to maximize the value of that asset. And so we've started a new 43-101 on that project through Micon, who has done the historic work on that. And we've hired Longford Exploration to oversee that process for us. I'm a capital markets person with, 30 years of experience. So I know what I'm doing in the capital markets, but I know what I don't know as well. And therefore you need really good geologists. And so we think that we're going to get a nice resource out of that, and then I need to maximize value for that. Then there's another asset in the southern part of Mexico called La Frazada, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do with that. So the geologists are going to come back to me and let me know what to do, but we're only 6 months in, so was focused on the Durango Penasco property and transitioning the company to Snow Lake, Manitoba, and becoming more lithium based. But I do need to maximize the value of those assets.
Right, you're not getting any value for them at the moment. So in a way, you're not in any imperative or rush to monetize that as such, but you want to maximize what that number looks like at some point, right?
Right. It's a call option.
Yeah, it's a call option for you. So it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of... It's not a burden right now. Your focus has got to be on, I think the narrative I want to hear from you today is about what are you going to do with the lithium component? And at some point you'll come back and say, well, here's what I think I'm going to do with the silver going forward, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we're transitioning the company to, being a much more North American battery metals company focused on lithium at the moment.
Right.
And Snow Lake, Manitoba is an extremely interesting district to get involved in.
Totally. Just on finish on silver, there's a lot of silver projects at the moment. A lot of them stranded, struggling, and a lot of them, right? So, and they're all pretty much saying the same thing. So in a way, having that flexibility around timing for you will help. Hopefully increase in silver price will help, and therefore maximizing the value at some point. Okay, so I think that's an interesting one, but I want to focus on the lithium pegmatites, lithium spodumene. It seems to be all kicking off in Canada at the moment. We've been so used to talking about the South American brine stories. We've obviously the hard rock projects out of Australia, but Canada's never really been a lithium producer, or so not a lot of
I don't know if I agree
companies.
with that, because the Tanko mine is in southern Manitoba, and it's one of the largest lithium brine producers in
Not
the
a
world.
lot of them, not a lot of juniors,
Yeah.
is my point.
Oh yeah, not a lot of juniors for sure, but lots more right now. For sure.
But that's quite tough, right? Because they're kind of stealing your thunder. There's a lot of noise going on. Or do you feel it helps you in terms of that narrative in the market?
Well, from our perspective and our setup, that's exactly what we want.
Okay.
Because if you look at the other two players that we're, not mimicking, but following along in, there's been, close to $50 million Canadian raised in the area. Mm-hmm. You have two companies, one that's on the NASDAQ and one that's on the CSE, that have both been involved in Snow Lake, and we're the third player coming in. So we can line up behind them in the peloton, mm-hmm. and one of them is going to build a mine with $160,000 tons of, LI at 6% coming out within the next few years, and they're going to build a full-on electrical plant. And you have the supply, mm-hmm. the supply chain all the way down into the battery metals market, and you've got 100 years of history of coming out of the air in the area of mining. And so we'll follow along in Snow Lake and, increase our land position and put ourselves in a really, really good position to create value for our shareholders.
Okay, so tell me a bit about the deal. How much do you pay for it? What do you know about what you've got?
Okay, let's go backwards a little bit. What did I pay for it? So when you look at our company and you look at the capital structure of the company, when I first took it over on June the 13th, it had 27 million shares and approximately $2.7 million of cash in the bank. And so that's a very tight capital structure. In order to restructure the company, we bought the Peny Property for 13 million shares, or approximately $1 million, and we took in $200,000 of cash on top of that. Mm-hmm. So the $200,000 of cash, we entered into a contract with Longford Exploration to do the sampling of the property. We have over 300 samples that we've taken out of the property in the middle of October that are currently at the lab being looked at. And we should see the results of those either at the end of Q1 or early Q2, 2023. So from there, we're also going to do some geochemical work. Mm-hmm. And once we get the geochem in, we'll make a determination of what we will do from a geophysical perspective. The thing about doing geophysical work is that it becomes more expensive. And so we need to think about what our capital allocation is at that time when we do that. And prior to that, in a good capital allocator, if you issue shares and you bring in money, I believe that you should match that money from the company into the area. So, we'll probably spend another $200,000 between now of the treasury between now and the end of Q1 in growing our land position.
Okay, so tell me a bit about the kind of the corporate structure. So you came in, you bought it. I mean, you're a shareholder of some notes, are you?
I am extremely aligned with any shareholder in the company.
What does that mean?
So it means that there were architects of the company that took it public in March of 2021 that were unhappy with the previous management team and what was going on in it and wanted to transition the company. Okay. So they asked me to come in as a capital markets person and figure out what to do with it.
Gotcha.
And so I'm the one that's made the decisions to transition it. They, going back to the tight capital structure, of the 40.6 million shares outstanding, the original assets came out of a company called Silver One, and they own approximately 10% of the company. Okay. The architects that got me involved in the company control about 30% of the company. Mm-hmm. And then the people who owned the Peny Property previously own approximately 20% of the company. And so there's about 40% of the company that is more like free trading, right? Those are the individual shareholders that in the name. 20% of those from 20% of those from the original go public transaction in March of 2021, and then the balance from the Peny acquisition.
Right. Okay. And have you put your own cold hard cash into this? Is this your focus, or have you got multiple other things on the go as well?
I would say that this has been my focus since June of this year.
Okay.
It's a project that I took on to get to this stage. I do have other things that I do work on a regular basis.
Yeah.
From 2000 to 2015, I worked at Bank of America or Scotia Capital in Toronto, New York, and spent about a third of my time in metals and mining. Since 2000, I've been working on more technology and real estate transactions. But I think the setup is really, really good for the mining space that's going on right now. As Mark Twain says, things are never the same, but they do rhyme. And as a result, there's a lot of similarities going on right now as went on in 2000. And I can see it, I can feel it. I worked on the desk, I worked with the Scotia Makata at the time. There's a lot of interesting things going on in the gold business and in the silver business to be able to maximize value out of our properties in Mexico. And then, commodities usually, if you go back to the 1800s, first gold moves and then commodities move behind it. And so you can see that in what happened in Q4 of 2011, when QT expectations peaked and, U.S. housing bottomed at fair value. And then, things did really, really well on a go-forward basis. Gold took off in, 2003, broke out over $300 an ounce and went to, almost 2000. We've seen gold, and then the commodities came in behind it. We saw that happen to 2006, right? Before QE started.
We should probably steer away from the politics and the history of gold, because it obviously, I was in banking like you at that time. It went on a tear and then it fell off the edge of a cliff.
It went from 1800 to 1000.
Right.
But commodities themselves, if you go back, the history of commodities is extremely, extremely important. And I'm a student of the history of commodities.
Maybe we should have a conversation about that, maybe offline or online.
No, I think it's extremely important to the setup of where we are headed in the commodities market, and why it is companies like Lodestar Battery Metals will do extremely well, because capital will come into the space, and stocks are widgets. And when capital comes into the space, the water goes up in the canal.
Well, I think there's a lot of positive signs for certainly battery metals around a huge industry mobilizing around battery metal needs, not just for EVs, but also, quite frankly, in the infrastructure build-outs as well. So I think you're entering the right space at the right time, timing it beautifully. Now, you talked about your capital markets experience. I want to understand the technical experience of the team, because I've had a look at the directors.
Right.
I see one one guy only. Is there a kind of bigger team behind him delivering the technical expertise on the ground?
First of all, Luc Vandermeer has worked both for Andrew Forrester and for Robert Friedland. So I don't know if there's too many geologists in the world who have, experience working in both of those companies. And he works at a company called Longford Exploration. Longford Exploration has worked on over 100 projects, similar and different than they're doing for the Peny Property, and as they're looking at for them, it's run by a person by the name of James Rogers. James Rogers is a very, very capable capital markets and geologist person, and he does a great job. And Luke is just amazing at what he does, and communicating with him and listening to what he does and all the reports that he provides to me. It's just been an absolute pleasure dealing with them. And as a capital markets person, you need to rely on your accountants and your lawyers and your geologists in order to be successful. And I'm a very good listener, but I'm also very good at making decisions. The right hand wants to do everything, but the left hand is the one that signs the checks. So I'm very careful.
I like that. But let's talk about what you're clear about what you're going to do with the silver, right? There's a process you got to go through. Moving the lithium project on, you talk about some of the expenditure that you're going to lay out for that and what you're going to do there. But you kind of got to insert yourself into that kind of big ecosystem. You point down south to all of the OEMs down there who'll need this stuff, and some of them are moving up the food chain and investing in companies. How do you intend to sort of play going forward? You've got one asset at the moment. Will there be?
We're going to grow the land position,
right? And so lithium is the thing for you.
Yes, right now,
That's it.
for sure. But
Okay.
from the battery metals perspective, I think the lithium fundamentals and the supply demand fundamentals for
Right.
lithium are extremely, extremely strong. And we could spend hours talking about it. But the most important thing is that other people are recognizing Snow Lake as being the area that you need to be in. And some of the other companies in the area have entered into agreements with companies like LG Energy, where they're going to build a $4 billion battery plant in and around the supply chain of that. And the other companies are going to be supplying that 160,000 tons of lithium into that area. So as that becomes more towards fruition, the land package that we have in any district play, just like with Boise Bay or just like in the Fort McMurray area, becomes extremely valuable as those companies build themselves out.
Okay, what I'm trying to work out is how do I play this as an investor, right? Because you've explained, some of what you're doing here, but it's relatively early days. You're a relatively small company at the moment with relatively small, cash available to you.
Well, I wouldn't say that we have a small amount of cash because, we have $2.5 million as of October 31st,
right.
and we have an under $5 million Canadian market cap.
Right, but in the context of what you can do with that sort of money, if I'm looking in as an investor, right? So I don't mean to be demeaning or
not at all. I'm just pushing back.
But I'm saying it's not a lot of money. You've got to be really careful about how you spend that wisely and well. And I'm trying to work out, is this build up a land package and then you're going to start, offloading some of this as the value increases? Do you intend to move forward and stay in control of this by raising more money and, doing whatever it is that you
Well, I have no need to raise any capital in the near term.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I like Manitoba is because the tax rates on flow through are very, very attractive. So I put myself in a very good position to be able to raise flow through money when it is the time to do that.
Right.
I very highly doubt I'll be able to need to do any of that stuff within the next 18 or 24 months.
Right. Okay. So, but your end game is what? Set yourself up to be taken out, to advance the project, to get some scale on the resource. And then see.
Well, in order to get the resource, I would have to drill it out. So that would be, the drilling program. Once we got there, would probably be either late 2023 or early 2024. So if I had to put the pin in it and you put a gun to my head, I would say, Q1. Middle of Q1 2024 would be a drill program. Until then, we're going to be piggybacking on what the other people are doing in the area, growing our land package and being very careful with our capital.
Great. So that's what I'm buying into. So this is a longer, so the people
it's a
you want to
district
attract
play.
It's a district play, a longer term hold and believe in the thematic of lithium specifically with battery metals more broadly.
Right.
Simple
Well, I
math.
would say that commodities are a very interesting thing right now, and my investment time horizon and why I got involved in it was 3 to 6 years. Right. I didn't get involved in this for an 18-month turnaround. You need to have, if you're going to commit your time, energy, and capital into a business, you need to have a little bit more of a longer term view. And I want to bring real value to shareholders. I don't just want to, be involved in something that's not creating value for shareholders.
Correct. And that's why I think it's important that I ask you that question, because I need to understand from you what type of investors you're looking for. Because if you kind of get day traders coming in and out, or people who may go on a ride with you and then get disappointed when the stocks come off for whatever reason, market dip, that's quite painful to deal with in the junior space. So I'm not quite sure what your experience is in terms of managing public companies. Have you done it before?
Well, I think that's kind of an interesting discussion point because, having been involved in metals and mining for 15 years at an institutional level, for some of the largest companies in the world doing that, I don't see a lot of difference. I mean, I just see different share prices and different things moving around. But working on a desk and then watching what goes on in the small cap world, everything's the same. And I don't think that there's a lot of people who really understand that. I think that there's just not a lot of people that have spent a huge amount of time in the institutional large cap world that have come into the small cap world to see what's going on in it. And I just see so many similarities.
I did too. I started where you were and then I kind of came down the junior space, and I think I learned a few things along the way. But
your shareholder base is extremely important to you.
Absolutely. And retail behaves slightly more emotionally than the institutional side of things. So it can drive success or not for companies.
We can talk about the value of the company and the share price. I mean, I'm very in tune to what's happening with it, and what's happening to the shareholder base and the turnover. As I said, there's only 40% of the shares that really trade out there of 40.6 million shares. So that's 8 million shares, right? So if you have 8 million shares that need to turn over, and approximately 2.5 million shares have traded since I've taken over the company, that 8 million shares is turning over. So we have a little bit ways to go at the moment until that cleans up and goes into new hands.
Right.
Like in any transition, when you're going from value to growth, or if you want to talk about the Lassonde curve, or however, anything you want to do about it, when Suncor, before they went into production, went down, like companies go through transitions, they go through different shareholder bases. So we're doing the exact same thing, which I've seen in the large cap world, for a long time, is we're just going through a transition of who our shareholder base is. And if you think about, 8 million shares at where our current share price is, it's not a lot of money. Right? And so, yes, they behave differently, but the concepts are still all the same. And so once you change over the shareholder base of that 8 million shares, which we have been, moving through, and then you have, the tax harvesting season that's going on in Canada right now. So this is a great time to be looking at these type of companies. And just like in the large cap space, things go down as you get through tax loss selling season, and then they go back up on the other side of it. And I think that a lot of these junior companies are going to behave very similar to the large cap companies as we move through this, and we'll be able to recover our share price to a more normalized basis, and then put ourselves in a position to go higher by creating real value. At the end of the day, something that you said that was really important is we're going to get real value through the drill bit. And so between now and then, it's time. I mean, it takes 10 years to build a mine. And the great thing about, Lodestar is that there's a company building a mine right near us. And, the supply demand fundamentals and, the amount of money that the government and other companies are spending in the battery metal space is they're going to need supply. And just like we saw with LNG and with Kitimat and other things like that, people will come in and want to find guaranteed supply. And also the capital structure trade between the EV companies that produce cars and the suppliers of the metals is a very interesting capital structure trade, right? Like if you think about what these companies are trading at in a market cap basis and what their EBITDA is versus what some of these large metal companies are trading at in their EBITDA basis, is all that capital structure trade is going to flow through from the large caps to the small caps, just like we saw with LNG, and just like we've seen in all of the different commodity cycles. This is exactly what happens. As Mark Twain used to say, or it's said, things they're never the same, but they do rhyme. And you need to take the setup and you need to take a look at those things, and then you need to have good people around you in order to deliver value.
Mark Twain also said some quite choice words about miners. So
there's great things about miners. Like I just remember being involved in Voisey Bay, and I had investments with Dean's Knight Capital Management at the time when Robert Friedland was doing that. And one of the things that Wayne Deans used to always say was the ore body has no idea who owns it. There's also the line about what's a miner. A liar standing on a piece of land. So that's why I'm very, very careful with how I'm going to allocate capital. And that's why I put myself in a district play so that I can see what's going on around me. And there's government support going on around with what's going on.
I buy the thematic. Sold, tick. I'm sold on the thematic. I'm trying to meet companies with a plan, and how they, one, obviously deliver value to the shareholder by driving the share price up, and two, deliver meaningful projects which actually become something. And there's a new kind of paradigm in mining. You said it yourself a couple of times, and I think that I'm looking for the companies and the management teams who can take advantage of that situation, create real value, rather than just
we need to get to the drill bit.
Yeah,
and we're looking for a needle in a needle stack, and we need to grow our needle stack in order to find needles.
You do. Exciting times.
Yeah.
And take this the right way. From a relatively low base, the leverage is there if you get it right.
Yeah, the likelihood of success in the Snow Lake region, looking at other regions for the hard rock spodumene, is extremely high. It does come with risks. There's no question about it. It does come with risk. You're talking about exploration mining, right? You know, there's production, there's proven, there's probable, and there's possible. And we're working in the possible. So we have to have a dream. And the dream has to have a story, and the story has to have legs. And then we need to build the backup behind the story through exploration and the drill bit in order to deliver value for our shareholders. And around that, if we have other companies in the district doing the same thing, all going in the same direction, the water goes up in the canal.
Well, best of luck. Thanks for coming in and sharing a new story with us. Hopefully everyone has a good look at it, poke around, and we'll see you again.
Absolutely.